Here we go, liberty through seasteading. So I want to talk, we've heard now about what's happening in Panama with seasteading. Now we'll talk about what we at Arkpad are doing in the Philippines. So the first thing I want to talk about is, just to kind of reiterate some of the points that we've already gone over, how exactly does seasteading benefit free cities? So existing free cities concepts and related concepts like network states and charter cities, these are projects where you have to be given land by a government in order to obtain autonomy. So the act of obtaining that land, you have to negotiate, you have to pay a large amount of money, it takes a lot of time, a lot of human capital, monetary capital, so on and so forth. Seasteads eliminate the need for land, making the negotiations easier. When you're negotiating for water space rather than for land space, the point that I want to get across today is it's going to make your path towards establishing a free city or some sort of a special autonomous zone much faster, much cheaper, and much more likely to happen with much less resistance. Water space has almost zero value to governments in most of the case. Giving it away is easy, and water farther from shore is even less valuable to governments. So I want to kind of illustrate this with an example. Let's say that I want to establish a free city or a special economic zone or some similar concept. I'm working on a project for this. So if I say that I want to, I go to, this is a map of Manila, this is the capital city of the Philippines. I'm going to go to them and I'm going to say, I want to have this red square, the land area in this red square. It's got a highway going through it, it's got utilities, it's got electricity, running water, all of these good things, it's got housing, it's got a population of people living there, and of course, local governments that we have to get on our side to even get the project started. The cost in terms of money, in terms of negotiation, in terms of everything that goes into establishing this new special economic zone or autonomous zone, the cost is very, very high. Compare that to the orange square. In the orange square, you're taking water space. Now, this is in Manila Bay in this example. That water space does not have any population, it does not have any local government, it does not have any highways or any infrastructure. You can get a larger space for less negotiation, less money, and less political concessions on the part of the government. And then, of course, the yellow space is the best option, because you're so far from shore. In this example, I've put it just outside of the territorial water. So let's say you want water space outside of territorial waters of an existing sovereign nation state. If you're outside of territorial waters, local governments don't even have a say. The only government you need to negotiate with is the government in the capital city. And the value of the water space, not land, but the water space that you're trying to obtain for your autonomous zone is extremely low for that government. So the idea here that I'm trying to stress is, if you want to start a free city and you're working on a free city project, looking at the water space instead of the land space is going to get you a lot more bang for your buck. It's going to get you there a lot faster, and you're going to face a lot less resistance once you're established. So let me just summarize this. Seasteading is the lowest barrier to entry for future free cities. Seasteading is the least financially and politically expensive. And seasteads, unlike land-based cities, are fully mobile and can be relocated if a political situation turns bad. That's a big deal based on things that we've recently seen in some Central American countries and other countries. If the political situation turns bad and you could just tow your floating city to a nearby Central American country, that would have been a total game changer. That would be a very, very big deal indeed. But if you're stuck on land, you're at the mercy of whatever this government says if they decide to change their mind. So let's talk about existing seasteading technology. This is the Arkpad prototype. We built this in Boracay, Philippines. Boracay receives about 1.5 million tourists every year, a lot of them coming from Taiwan and Japan. Now, I'm also going to talk about the Reef Resort. That's a separate seastead that we built. But let me talk for a minute on the Arkpad here. So we didn't design this prototype for luxury. We designed this prototype to test out our technology. We're using a multi-spar design. So this multi-spar design isn't just on one C-pillar, it's actually on 5. And the reason is because we're trying to basically minimize the draft. We're trying to go from a massive draft that goes deep, deep in the water to a very shallow draft that allows you to bring something like this towards a coral reef or a seamount, or bring it near shore to launch it more easily from more areas and not need like a giant shipyard to do this. Basically, it's a cost-effective strategy to have more spars like this, and it can also be a major benefit to stability when you go through harsh weather. Now I'm going to play a video while I talk. Can someone please click play on this video? There we go. Do we have sound? There we go. So, when we designed the Arkpad, we designed it with the idea in mind that it would physically snap together to connect to neighboring Arkpads. It would utilize this ability to share resources such as electricity, fresh water, septic, fiber optic cable. So you can have an internal intranet, sort of like a village internet within your floating city. You can also have kind of like roads or walkable pathways between the houses. So even though these are all individual Arkpads that are all floating on multiple spars beneath them, the whole structure together, joins together, allows you to easily walk around to your neighbors, to commercial and residential and industrial areas. And also, because it's many separate structures, it can actually flex with the waves. So if you have very, very large waves or a very serious weather system, because this structure is not rigid, it can't snap in half like a boat, it's not going to sink. Now, there's a lot of reasons it's not going to sink. To start off with, the spars that we have here are actually filled with foam. It's a flotation foam for added buoyancy. That means that if a single spar pops a leak inside of it, it's not going to flood. So even if you take a sledgehammer, you take a gun, you shoot holes in this thing, it's not going to sink. It's extremely safe. I want to stress this point again by saying, if you go on Facebook right now and you look at Boracay, Philippines, you'll see pictures on Facebook of a recent typhoon that went through about 2 weeks ago, a hurricane. It smashed coastal buildings, it flipped over cars and tricycles, which are like three-wheel, like mini cars. It actually sunk several boats in the area of our floating house. This prototype that we have in the water right now, that's the second hurricane that it has gone through since we launched it several months ago. That proves that this design that we have, this multi-spar design, is not only lower cost to manufacture, but extremely strong, extremely durable, and we want these things to last 100 years, and although we can't prove they're going to last 100 years yet, we're working on optimizing this design further. There we go. So I want to show off what process we use to get to this design, to get to this prototype. One of the things that we did is something called a wave simulation. So we took the shape of the seastead that we were going to build, and we put it through this simulation where we imagined that it was going to experience 4-meter tall waves. Go ahead and play this video right there. So in this simulation, you can see the spars under the water. They're not so deep, they're not so large, but because they're kind of stout, they're kind of short, it actually is able to ride through these very large waves in relative safety, and it's able to maintain almost an upright position, even in extreme weather. And again, this is what we want. When you're talking about going 12 miles out, 24 miles out, 200 miles out to sea, which should be the long-term goal for seasteading, you want very strong, very durable structures that can last a lifetime, or better yet, your lifetime and your children's lifetime. I think you have to click play so I can go ahead. There we go. Now it's going. Oh, is it going to go? Okay, here we go. Now let's talk about the second seastead design that we have. Now, this doesn't look like a seastead at first glance. This looks like a fish farm, and that's because this is a fish farm. So we call this the hexafarm. The central cage is where we grow fish. For our first harvest, we grew milkfish and rabbitfish together, and we harvested about 1.5 metric tons just a couple of weeks ago, and that's also, you can see that on our Facebook page, and here's the very high resolution render of that. So surrounding the central cage, we have first, a top layer of seaweed. So when you grow seaweed in this protected environment, it'll protect the seaweed from natural predators, which sea turtles eat a lot of seaweed. But also the byproduct of that seaweed is oxygen. So one of the things that can affect fish farms is that when the dissolved oxygen gets too low in the water, that can cause a mass die-off. So the idea is that we grow seaweed, and the byproduct of the seaweed feeds the fish. The fish droppings feed the lobsters down at the bottom. The shellfish in the hanging lantern baskets clean the water of these particulates, including the fish waste. So you end up with a system where you're growing lots of different animals together in an enclosed ecosystem, which actually maximizes your seafood output and minimizes waste to the lowest that it can possibly be. Let's keep going. All right, so now expanding on the idea of the hexafarm as a farm for multiple different types of seafoods, the next step we took was to say, okay, now that we can grow food under the water, we have our agricultural space. But now we add our residential space, our commercial space, our industrial space above the water. So that's one of the nice things about building in the water is you can have agricultural space right under, imagine building a house, then building a farm underneath it. That's kind of what this is like. So under the water, you have the farm. Above the water, you have these little white houses here, which we call glamp houses because they're like glamping tents with insulation, electricity. Each room has its own septic tank, all of these things to prevent waste from going into the water. Then, of course, we have a solar grid, again, using this design where you want to have a seastead that physically snaps together, that connects with other seasteads of the same type for that maximum scalability. So we took this design, and we decided we're going to build this into a full resort, and we have a render of the resort right here. So right now, the prototype of this hexafarm is in a place called Samal Island. That's in the south of the Philippines. The reason we put it there is because while the Arkpad, the larger one on the spars, can handle these very powerful storms and has already gone through 2 hurricanes, this smaller seastead, which is kind of like a seastead fish farm combination, is really meant for more protected, safer waters. And then here you can see all of these houses, all of these kind of like condo rooms kind of in a ring around this central fish cage. So you can imagine you wake up in the morning, you're on this floating resort or in this floating village or what have you. Maybe it's like a floating special economic zone. You wake up in the morning, you go out and you see the fish swimming around. And then you go on your back patio and you see the dolphins jumping in the ocean and so on and so forth. So I think, once you're out there, and I think Grant can attest to that too, the best kind of waterfront view you can get is really when you're in the water. The beach doesn't compare. Coastal real estate is great, but seasteads, I think, always have a better view. And then lastly, here's our common area. So we have solar panels on top to provide shade because we're in the Philippines, it gets very hot. And then we have this kind of more common area. So again, the original resort that we're building, it is a resort. It's meant for tourism. But this layout that I'm showing here today can be used as a residential space or any other type of space, not just as a resort. Now let me play a video. Right there. Go ahead. So here is a video of the actual prototype that we have. Right now we have one room connected to this hexafarm, and then we have the small bamboo house where we're keeping the fish feed to keep all the fish fed. And actually all these extra cages you see here on the sides are for rabbit fish, which we've been growing a lot of extra rabbit fish recently. Now, when we start expanding the resort, our goal is to get about 80 rooms built within the first year. The first phase is going to open in probably January or February, sometime in Q1 of 2025. That's going to have 16 rooms. So this is room 1 right here, and we're going to get to room 16 in just a few months, and that's when we're going to have a big grand opening ceremony to bring in all of the tourists from the region. And also internationally. The area where we're building this, Samal Island, it does receive a lot of tourism from Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, and a little bit from Japan as well. And you can actually see, because we're stationed in a mariculture park right now, there are a bunch of other fish farms in the area nearby. But because, because this is easily scalable, and it's actually very cost-effective to scale, we're going to end up scaling it very quickly and probably surpassing them. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, I think you have to click play. There we go. Okay, so let me show you the area. So this area in red is where the resort is located. I'm going to hold this actually. This area in red is where the resort is located. This orange line are all of the routes that you can take by boat to get to the resort. These are all ports. The green circle at the top is the international airport, so you can see you could land on a flight from any country, land right there, and take a boat right down to the resort. Then this blue area is all these coral reefs. So we have Kittapong sandbar right here. Then we have a bunch of reefs up here. Then we have very large coral reefs to the north and actually a giant clam sanctuary, which is one of only a few in the world. So we're building this resort in a very, very nice location. It's very naturally pretty. And actually, the Samoa government gave us this spot and said this would be perfect for a floating resort. And we really appreciate their cooperation because they've gone out of their way several times. The government is very in favor of the project that we're working on right now. So that's what I have to show about what we're building in the Philippines right now. If you're interested in owning a room in this resort or just partial ownership of a room, we're selling partial ownership right now on our website. It starts at only $130 to just own 0.75% of a room, and then you'll be provided with that rental income as well, or you can buy several rooms or whatever you want. Now, if you're interested in getting a seastead for, if you want to talk to us about setting up a seastead for a special economic zone or some kind of larger project, the Arkpads are going to start at $165,000, which I think is very cost-effective considering what they can do. If you want any more information, just contact me. Right here is my information, or go to arkpad.co and contact us through that website, and my assistants will get to you, and we can talk. So thank you again, everyone.